Hello everybody. Today we're going to be learning about New England, looking specifically at the role of religion and religious dissent in New England. Here are your goals. You'll notice there are a good number of vocabulary terms today, so make sure you're paying attention to what those words mean. So there's a big misconception in a lot of American history that the Pilgrims and the Puritans came over to New England for religious freedom. Now that's true in one sense, but it's wrong in another sense. In one sense it's true because they come over here to start colonies so that way they can practice religion the way they want to, because they're not allowed to practice their version of Christianity in England, so they leave. And so in that sense, they do stand for religious freedom. But on another stance, in another way, they are totally against religious freedom. And that is, they believe everybody should be a Puritan, and everybody should do Christianity their way. And they don't tolerate anybody who has different beliefs about Christianity. And so let's look a little bit more at what Puritanism was all about. Puritanism was a super strict form of Christianity, and it included a bunch of pretty harsh-seeming beliefs. They believed that only very few people were actually saved and would go to heaven, and that the whole rest of the world were sinners and were going to hell. The sinners, or the saved, conveniently, were the Puritans who had moved to Massachusetts. They believed that dancing, drinking, gambling, and theater were sinful and should be punished. They believed that clothes should be boring and modest, so they all wore like black and white and gray and covered up most of their body, even when it was hot outside. And they believed that people who taught anything different about God were heretics. That is, they were charged with the crime of heresy, which meant that you were teaching falsehoods about religion. And this was a very serious crime, and you could be exiled or even executed in certain circumstances. So another thing that's important is that religion and politics were really connected in Massachusetts. In order to get to vote in Massachusetts, you had to be a member of the Puritan Church, plus you had to be a man. But so this meant that anybody who didn't believe in Puritanism didn't get any voice in politics. So the separation of church and state, which is a big idea in American politics, was not an idea that was popular in Massachusetts. And it was really hard to become a member of the Puritan Church. You had to go through long interviews, and a lot of people were denied membership, so then they just didn't get any say in politics. The Puritans did not believe in religious toleration. They believed that they were right and everybody else was wrong. This is very different from later ideas of religious freedom that we're going to see. As you might have already guessed, Puritanism was not popular with everybody in Massachusetts, and this led to the rise of religious dissent in the Massachusetts colony. Dissent means to disagree with a popular opinion or view. And it's a word that usually goes along with people who have different ideas about religion. And there were many people who came to Massachusetts who dissented from the main ideas of Puritanism. Two big names that I want you guys to know are Anne Hutchinson and Roger Williams. Anne Hutchinson was a very intelligent woman, and she argued that the church had no right to force people to act in a certain way. Basically that it was up to individuals to decide what was right or wrong, not for the church. And for this belief, which seems like a very modern and reasonable belief to most Americans today, she was found guilty of heresy, and she was exiled from the colony of Massachusetts, which is a big deal because, remember, Massachusetts is just one little colony surrounded by wilderness. But she eventually finds a home and, lives out the rest of her life outside of Massachusetts. The other guy is Roger Williams. So Roger Williams argued for complete religious freedom. He believed that people should be allowed to believe whatever they wanted, and that nobody should be punished just for what they think. This is a big idea, and it's going to become more and more important in American history, and is eventually going to be enshrined in the First Amendment, where people are allowed to believe and think whatever they want. Roger Williams, predictably, was also banished from Massachusetts, but he didn't go quietly. He instead decided to found his own colony. So he went a little ways south and found a nice little harbor and founded the colony of Rhode Island. And here, people of all different religions were welcome. So basically, anybody who got in trouble in Massachusetts would go hang out in Rhode Island with Roger Williams instead. And pretty soon, Rhode Island was doing very well. In spite of all this religious argument, though, the New England colonies were doing very well. And this was primarily because they had a good economy. So remember, economy means all the stuff and all the services that are being produced. So they are doing a good job of making and doing all the things they need to be happy and healthy. Farming wasn't great up in the north because it was kind of cold and the soil wasn't very good, but they were able to produce enough food to support the population. But there was a lot of money to be made fishing, shipbuilding, and trading. And so New England becomes centered around those industries, and you start to see larger towns focused on these industries, fishing, shipbuilding, and trade. And New England becomes pretty rich because of these industries. You also see the beginning of many more colonies. So branching out from Massachusetts, you see New Hampshire beginning in 1631. You see Rhode Island in 1636, and also Connecticut in 1636. And all of these colonies, even though they are a little bit different from Massachusetts, share some of the basic qualities of New England, that the religion is very important for them, and their economies are based on trade and fishing and basically being connected to the sea. One other really interesting thing that happens during this time period in New England is the Salem witch trials, which I'm sure you guys have all heard about before, but I want to talk about it a little bit more. So in 1692, about 60 years after Massachusetts was founded, fears of witchcraft break out in a small town in Massachusetts called Salem. And here we see one of the stranger beliefs of Puritanism coming to light. And that is that they believed that Satan was an active force in the world, and that he would sometimes meet people and exchange special powers for their souls. So he would basically buy their souls by giving them magical powers. So a group of young girls who had been acting strangely, they'd been doing weird things like kind of like collapsing and muttering and barking like dogs and acting very weird. So to figure out what was going on with these girls, a Puritan minister, like a priest type guy, went up and talked to them. And he became convinced after talking to them that the girls had been bewitched. And the girls then began to accuse people of witchcraft. So they started saying, like, this person is the person who bewitched me, or that person is the person. And so based on the evidence provided them by these young girls, people started to get put on trial. And pretty soon more and more people were being put on trial. And so people would go into the church where they would be asked questions, and the Puritan ministers would decide who was and who was not guilty. And people had to do all sorts of weird things to try and prove that they weren't witches. By the end of the trial, 20 people and 2 dogs had been found guilty of witchcraft, and they were executed. The idea of finding dogs guilty of witchcraft is just crazy, but it happened. And so what I want you guys to think about for this whole affair is, what do the Salem witch trials show us about Puritan beliefs and Puritan culture? What can we take away from this really weird event in history? Thanks for watching.